Greetings and welcome to another exciting episode of Analogpod. I'm your host, Leonard Carillo, and together we're going to explore, probe, and celebrate the passion and very interesting journey of artists and musicians from across the fruited plain. So sit back and enjoy today's episode. You're going to enjoy. Okay, we're here today with guitar extraordinaire. Not only that, he's a very, very good friend of mine. He's been a friend of mine for many, many, many years, and too many years to count. But we are very, very honored to have with us today, Mr. Mike Gregory. How are you doing, sir?
Man, great to be here. So excited about this. When I found out you were launching a podcast, I thought that's a great endeavor for you. You have so much experience and know so many people. So not knowing that I would be graciously asked to participate. So I'm very glad to be here. Well,
I'm glad you're here. You had a little incident yesterday that I guess a tree outside your house decided that it wanted to maybe go to be a part of your inside.
Thankfully, it was not successful. We have a 40-foot coastal redwood in our front yard. A terrible storm came through, and about halfway up, the tree splits, and one of the sides of those splits landed on the roof, and so we had a little bit of housekeeping to do. Thankfully, the roof was not breached. So,
well, I'm glad you're safe, and I'm glad that everything's okay, and stuff in life happens, and we've had some really, really bizarre weather here in California. Had all the fires this summer, and now it's pouring down rain. I thought it was in Oregon here, but so hey, well, listen, let's get right to this. Let's get right to this. I want people to get to know you. Those people that know you know you. Those people that don't know you need to get to know you. So first of all, let me ask you this, Mike. What first got you to pick up the guitar?
At the age of 9, I should back up a little bit. About a year before that, I was hearing music and would have a very strong reaction within. I went with my stepdad to a pizza parlor to pick up a pizza. I was 8, and Bob Dylan's Lay Lady Lay was on the jukebox. And he got the thing and said, "Let's go." And I was like, "Can't we stay and listen to the song?" I was just captivated by the atmosphere that it created. Just had this very spontaneous, positive response to it. But then a year later, at age 9, a lady that would come over to the house and cut my mom's hair said, "Hey, I've got these records. I don't want them. Do you want them?" She said, "No, but leave them. The boys might like them." And fortuitously, it was Jimi Hendrix, Axis Bold as Love. It was Hendrix and Otis Redding live at Monterey Pop Festival. Frank Zappa and the Mothers were only in it for the money, and the Best of Cream. So, at that age, I should have been exposed to the Archies and Bobby Sherman, but we got just the cream of rock guitar music at that time dropped in our lap. My older brother, Scott, and I, he's 3 years older, and he started to pursue the guitar a few months after I did.
Yeah, I kind of knew that, Mike, but I didn't realize. I was listening to, I think, like you said, Bobby Sherman and the Archies back when I first started. So you were thrown into the deep end of the pool. So out of those records, what was there any one person that inspired you most?
Hendrix, absolutely. He was my ground zero. Again, I didn't know the technicalities of guitar playing. I had no idea that I was listening to the innovator of his generation, that here came along a guy who was literally reinventing the electric guitar and what could be done with it. He was just the first guy I heard. What a great start, great place to start. So, but because I didn't know any of those technical things or of his innovation, it was just the whole atmosphere of the record, you know, the feeling. It was a feeling and an overall impression. And it was just so strong. I mean, I was in fourth grade, but I would come home from school and put on that record every day and just lather, rinse, repeat, you know.
Well, definitely, it's I'm so glad that happened because I think it's made you the guitar player, the musician that you are today. So
it's his fault.
Yeah, it's his fault. Yeah. Well, listen, there's so much that we could talk about because we have known. How long have we known each other?
I met you through the late Ray Archie in late 1977 when dinosaurs roamed the earth.
77. Wow. Okay. Yeah. and let me tell the audience the story of how we met. It was very, very interesting. I had a band called Mana. I believe it was Mana. And yep. Ray Archie, the late, great Ray Archie, he called me up and he goes, "Hey, Leonard, I think we found our guitar player." And I said, "Okay," because we were looking for a guitar player. We talked about it. And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, tell me about it." He goes, "Well, instead of telling me about it," and I don't know if this was exactly the conversation we had, but you know, he says, "Why don't you just take a listen to him?" Okay. And I said, "Okay." Well, the guitar player on the other end started playing Freebird, Leonard Skinner's Freebird. And I listened over the telephone, and I just sat there and went, "Okay, that's funny. That's funny, Ray. Okay, you put the telephone next to a stereo, okay." And so anyway, you had finished, and Ray got back and he's, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, that's funny. That's funny, Ray. Okay. So now let's talk about this guitar player. What are your thoughts? And he goes, "Well, he just auditioned for you." And I said, "Ray, that was a stereo." He goes, "No, it wasn't." He says, "His name is Michael Gregory, and I'm sitting right here with him, and the rest is history." The rest is history.
Well, and you know, from my perspective, Ray and I had met several years before, about 3 years before. And I think that when you and he were putting the band together and looking for guitar players, he said, "I know this kid, but I can't find him. I don't know where he was." Because when Ray and I had first met each other, I was living in Auburn. Well, this was in Citrus Heights, and Ray was driving to work at Sunrise Rollerland. And there I was skateboarding down Greenback Lane. And he goes, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." I said, "Come on." And he dragged me back to my place. And that's when he put me on the phone with you. Okay. You know what? I'm sure he told me that the logistics of that, but I don't remember it. But yeah. And you were like, what, 15? 15 or 16. Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of started the journey. And we have, we played together through, anyway, enough about me. But so anyway, through this journey, Mike, you have obviously established yourself as an A-lister, okay, definitely in this town. Give me a brief history, okay, of some of the players that you've played with and also performed with. Give me the best list you can, because I mean I think the audience would be very, very interested in who you have, who you've partaked, who you've bended strings with.
Okay, let's do the quick thumbnail sketch easy for me to say, rented lips, chronologically. So from age 9 to 14, I think was like my first gigs. playing in a gospel band with Buck Owens' cousin Dale. And then and that's where I met Ray. Then playing in local bands with you and with others through high school years. Then in my early to mid 20s, started getting calls locally for studio work. And I found like, wow, this is like, when you, like with you with film, you find, oh, here's where I belong. Here's where my gift is, And so, because there's all kinds of different players. Some are great improvisers, some are great performers, some are stylists, others are good at studio work. So I always had a quick ear. I could pick things up or come up with a part quickly. And when I found that was a fit, I really started getting a lot of calls because two guys in town that had been doing a lot of the studio work, Kevin Shokan, he left, went to LA and started playing with George Duke and Diana Ross. And then Bobby Gonzalez went with Sheila E. And so it made a big hole in the scene for me that I walked into. And so then the first gig, like national gig of note, in 1988, I moved to Salt Lake City for a year to work with the Osmond Brothers, and ended up being their last tour as the brothers. It was Alan, Wayne, Jay, and Merrill, the four older brothers. And they went, you know what, we've been doing this forever, we're done. So when that dried up, I moved back to Sacramento and dove right back into studio work and local bands. In 1993, 92, I formed a Michael Gregory band. I said, wow, I've been playing for all these years, fulfilling everybody else's musical vision. Who am I musically? So I started writing instrumental music and got a crew of guys together. We made a CD that we released in 93 called Guitar Architecture. KVIE Channel 6, the local public television station here in Sacramento, had a contest in 5 categories of musical styles. Bands auditioned by tape. Then when you made that cut, you did a live battle of the bands. And then the ones that won in each of their categories got to be featured in a TV show that they produced called Studio 6. And we were on that. And I had no idea they syndicated that out to all the PBS stations, because years later, I had a guy that I knew, Ray McKinley, that played bass for Patti LaBelle. He said, yeah, man, I saw you on that Channel 6 thing. I said, oh, were you in Sacramento at the time? He said, no, I was in a hotel room in New York City, and it came on, the New York PBS station. So that was a surprise to me. Then in 1998, after my band, we'd had a really good run. We had opened for, some of my heroes, Steve Morrison, the Dixie Dregs, Eric Johnson, Stanley Jordan, Great White. I started playing locally with Roger Smith, who was the keyboard player in my band. He's been with Tower of Power the last 25 years. And with Roger, we opened for a bunch of people, Dave Cause and What You Won't Do, Do for Love, Bobby
Caldwell.
Thank you, Bobby Caldwell. A bunch of people like that. But I had kind of topped out locally here what I wanted to do. And so I started looking at Austin and Nashville. And Nashville had more of what I want. Austin's a great local scene if you're doing nothing but originals and don't mind starving. And so I wanted to eat. So I went to Nashville, and it only took about 6 months. Got an audition for an artist with Curb Records named Shane McAnally. Some of your viewers may know the last year NBC had a talent show for songwriters called Songland. And he's the one of the 4 judges, the one with the red hair. And he did okay as an artist. I think he got top 20, never cracked the top 10 as an artist. And we did a lot of touring. We went out for, 2 months with Alabama. And that was great. They treated us like kings, huge venues. And that was a great way to go. He lost his deal with Curb, went to LA, tried to do a pop thing, came back to Nashville and had 5 number ones as a writer.
Nice.
Within 2 years, he just blew up, caught fire. So he's a great person to be on Songland. Toured with him till he lost his deal. And then from there, we went to Alicia Elliott, who had a deal with MCA, really sold for singer. I told her, you're a soul singer, not a country singer. And she knew that. And so she quit touring when she got a show with NBC. They had a Saturday morning kids show called All About Us, about these girls that form a band. And she played the lead singer in that. And then from her, I went to Billy Gilman. So Shane was like 22, Alicia was 18, Billy was 12. But he was a prodigy. He was technically the most proficient singer of any adult kid anybody ever worked with. He never went flat or sharp, was just spot on. 12 years old, you know, so my joke at the time was, yeah, my next tour, I'm going to be backing up an embryo. So then after Billy, then I did a short stint with Jody Messina, did a very short stint with Shannon Brown, and then landed with Steve Holy. And he had 2 number ones. Good Morning Beautiful, that was featured in a J-Lo film, the name of which escapes me now. And then he had another one called Brand New Girlfriend. And that one just hit number 1 right around the time that I was getting out of touring. And so that was kind of my arc. Once I got in Nashville and got that first gig with Shane McAnally, I never had to audition again. It was just word of mouth. You know people. Hey, there's a gig here, come and get this gig. An interesting aside, one time on a flight back from a gig, flying back to Nashville, who's sitting in the seat next to me is Eddie Money. And he slept most of the flight, but then when he woke up near the end, I said, hey, Eddie, what are you doing in Nashville? Oh, man, my manager's in Nashville. I'm going there to put together a new band. I said, oh, really? I said, you need a guitar player? He goes, yeah. I said, so how do I get a spot? He goes, you know my tunes? I said, man, I've been in so many cover bands. I probably played your tunes as much as you have. And he was all right. Oh, here's my cell number. Gave me a cell number. I called him. You got a drummer? Yeah. And we got together at his agent's office on Music Row and just played and stuff. But then I got a call from another artist, Lori Morgan, to go out with her. And that was going to be more work than Eddie had at the time. So ended up not going with Eddie, but he was a fun guy to hang out with for a little bit. He was really something. So that was my arc. The major label artists I played with as a studio musician. I played on Shane McAnally's record. That was, like I said, went into the 20s. Then before I left for Nashville here, there was a producer named Brian Morgan in Sacramento, and a really hot group at the time, mid-90s, called SWV, Sisters with Voices, a 3-girl group. And they'd had a bunch of number ones. And then Brian brought me in to play acoustic guitar on this hit of theirs called Rain. And when he called me for the session, he says, hey, do you play bass? Yeah, a little bit, you know, I mean, I'm not Jocko or anything. And I literally said that. And he goes, okay, because I need you to put some bass on this thing. I go, okay. So brought a bass with me. When I get there, he goes, I was trying to loop this thing and sample it off a record, but I can't get it to loop right. So I need you to play it. Well, it was literally Jocko's Portrait of Tracy with all the harmonics and all that.
Oh
and
my gosh.
Yeah. And, you know, I remember Tommy Tedesco said, never say no, never tell him you can't do something, tell him you can, and just do what you can. And so I'm like, Portrait of Tracy. I go, why don't you go work on the track and let me work on this? I said, trying to learn the harmonics and all that. And down. And thankfully, the tempo of that song was really slow. Rain. It was, you know, pretty laid back. So it was slower than what Jocko was doing. And so we were able to get something with that. And then about, a few months later, and I know that cracked the top 10 on the R&B charts. And about a few months later, he called me for a session. He wanted to do a hip hop, soul, funky version of Kansas, Dust in the Wind. Oh. And so I played acoustic guitar on that. And at the time, I think his intention was to do it for his own solo record that he was going to do. But he wound up producing a record for Eric Benet, who was married to Halle Berry. And Eric said, I want to cut that. And so they just used the track. So I wound up on an Eric Benet record, kind of slipped on a banana peel.
Well, so how did, where does Wayman Tisdale, the late, great Wayman Tisdale,
right around that same time, okay. Summer of '96. Thank you. Yeah, I left him out of it. Shame on me. He was great. So he had been, I played on the Sacramento Kings after coming from the Indiana Pacers. And there was a guy named Robert Brookins, the late Robert Brookins, who was just a legend in Sacramento music. He had a group called the Fondells, and he ended up going to LA, doing very well. He played bass and keyboards with Clark Duke Project, Stanley Clark and George Duke. Then he ended up producing Stephanie Mills' #1 hit, Where's the Love? And then spent his last years in Earth, Wind, and Fire. But he would do local gigs at On Broadway in Sacramento. And I was in that band. And Wayman would come down and hang out, and he'd get up and jam a little bit and stuff. And then the next summer, this was 1996, Robert called me up and said, hey, you want to do Wayman's tour? What are you doing in the summer? I said, yeah, I got a couple of things I'll have to cancel, but yeah, you bet. That'd be great. So we flew to Phoenix because Wayman was with the Suns by that time. And he had this huge house, a living room you could park a jet in. And we just, to his wife's dismay, moved the furniture out to the walls and rehearsed in the living room. And she'd had enough of that. And then we got moved to a club that a friend of his owned. So he just paid him to close the club down so we could rehearse. And then we went out on tour, did a bunch of great gigs. And we, man, it was embarrassing. The last gig of that tour, we're working with Ramsey Lewis, the great Ramsey Lewis, and he opened for us. I just went, oh, this is a travesty. Yeah. I mean, since the 60s, this guy's killing, he's a legend. And that was a little embarrassing, but that was great to work with him. And sadly, he and Robert Brookins passed away within a year of each other. Robert from a heart attack and Wayman from cancer that he fought for a couple of years. So thank you for bringing that up. I left a hole there.
No, it was, he was one of my, I loved Wayman's style. It was really more like a guitar player than he was a bass player. But I loved his style. So
yeah, Victor Bailey, I think, was his big inspiration.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, well, listen, let's talk about the road. Okay. You've had a lot of experience on the road, and I've had some experience on the road. And so tell me your favorite road story.
Boy, there's a lot of them. There's one that I talk about with you. But let me, I got another one that, that comes to mind. When I was with Wayman, because Jimi Hendrix was such, my huge ground zero inspiration. There's a theater in Phoenix called the Celebrity Theater, and it's in the round, and the stage rotates, and the seating 360 around the stage. In fact, that night when we played, the monitors are all set in an array around the stage, and the stage revolves inside of it. So the monitors are stationary on this ring outside of the rotating part. And Wayman went up to showboat, and he had one foot on the rotating part and one foot on a monitor, And it started like that, and he almost fell over. And, you know, he was like 6'9", so that would have been a big crash. Well, one of the times I played there several times at that venue, twice with Wayman and with several country acts that I toured with. But one night with Wayman, we opened for Al Green. Celebrity wasn't that big a venue, so dressing room space was limited. So Al Green and Wayman each had their own dressing room, and then there was a big room, and both the bands for both artists shared that room. So we did our went up and did our set, and I was wearing a t-shirt with Hendrix on it that night. And I go back in, I'm putting my guitar in the case, and one of Al's two guitar players, an older gentleman, said, "Mighty fine playing, young man." I said, "Well, thank you so much." I said, and he kept staring at my shirt, and I said, "Jimmy, he's the reason I play. He's my inspiration." And he said, "Yeah," he said, "I played with him." And I said, "Wait a minute, are you Larry Lee?" And he smiled and said, "Yes, I am." Jimmy, before becoming famous, he went into the Army and was in Fort Campbell on the Tennessee-Kentucky border. And so Hendrix played around Nashville at that time. And one of the guys he played with locally was Larry Lee. Well, then, you know, in his career, he never had a second guitar player except at Woodstock. And that guitar player was Larry Lee.
Wow.
And so to not only meet him, but to get a compliment from him, that's one of my favorite stories.
Gee, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I've got one I want to share with the audience that basically involves you. And you'll probably remember this. We were on the road, and when you get on the road, you don't eat the most healthiest food. It's not usually a prerequisite to eat healthy food unless you've got a chef traveling with you. And in our case, we didn't have one. So, but you know, Mike, you came back on the bus after we stopped at a truck stop, and you came back in the bus with this bag of Cheetos. You know where this is going. You came back in the bus with Cheetos, and you proceeded to finish that bag of Cheetos. Now, I have no problem with that, other than the fact that 2 or 3 days later, there was Cheeto dust everywhere on that bus. You couldn't touch anything. There was Cheeto dust in this. And so my favorite story of on the road with you is your contribution to the tour bus that we were in, and the sprinkling of the Cheeto dust everywhere. I have to believe it was probably
All-in covers everything, right?
Yeah. So anyway, that's my favorite, and I swear I'm not a songwriter, but I swear somebody's got to write a song called Cheeto Dust.
Cheeto Dust.
Yeah, Cheeto Dust. But you know, and one of the story I was just thinking about some stories this morning. I remember we were actually on the same tour, and we were getting kind of tired of being with the same people crammed up in a bus for so long that we decided, hey, let's ride in the equipment in the equipment truck.
Yeah.
And let's get out of town. Okay. Well, we drive. I don't remember where we drove. Maybe you can remember this, but we drove somewhere, and I had taken almost a box of No-Dos.
Yeah.
I learned my lesson. Don't do that. Okay. We tried every trick in the bus, in the book, to stay awake and drive, because we had to get, I think it was from Memphis.
We went from Memphis to Albuquerque.
Okay. And it's like we wanted to get there ahead of time, so we were going to just drive straight through. I was driving the equipment truck, which was probably illegal. I'm sure it was, because I didn't have the right license or whatever. But we decided to pull over, okay, and we pulled over into a church parking lot.
That's right. Yeah.
Remember that? And so we decided to open the back of the
box,
the equipment truck, and just kind of sleep amongst the equipment. Okay. Yeah. Well, the next thing we hear and we see are these lights. Okay. Well, someone had called the police on us, and we had to explain to the police why we were sleeping in the church parking lot. They thought we were there to rob them, and we were there like, no. So anyway, we explained. But anyway, I just thought that was a funny story, and again, this is about you, not about us. But
I remember that very well.
We had some good times. We had some bad times. So let's talk about your gear real quick. Because this could be about a 4-hour show, and I'm sure our audience would not stick around for that. Let's talk about your gear. One of the things that impressed me, Mike, is you got one of the very first Bradshaw systems. Okay, I know Steve Lukather had one built, but you had one built for you. And it was around the time that he first started building those. So tell us about your gear. Tell me where you at now. What's your?
Yeah, well, this was in the mid '80s, and that's what you had to have. That was the sound of the radio at that time. That very highly processed guitar sound, and producers and engineers loved the fact that they just had to throw mics on your speakers. You had the compression and the reverb and the delay and all of that stuff in stereo. They didn't have to sprinkle a bunch of fairy dust on you after the fact. You came just boom, ready, throw mics on it. It's good. And so, but of course that thing was a chiropractor's dream too. It's the size of a refrigerator. So logistically it was challenging. It was a good thing I was young. So, but when I got to Nashville, that was the antithesis. It was amps and pedals, So my touring years in Nashville, when there were bus dates and we'd take our own gear, then I had a 410 Fender DeVille.
Okay.
And what made sense was to have all my sounds, my distortions, everything in the pedal board, because you do a lot of fly dates where you just take your guitar on your pedal board and they give you a backline amp.
Right.
And so I just said, okay, I need to be able to just get my sound, any basic clean amp. So, every backline company either has a Fender Twin or a DeVille. And so that's what I used in my Nashville years, and just had literally all my sounds on the pedal board. Then coming back to Sacramento and doing my own band, I now use a 112 combo amp by Dr. Z. He doesn't make these anymore. They're called the Stangray. And it was the first Dr. Z amp that Brad Paisley used, and was also the kind of the template for the Brad Paisley model that they now make. And it's basically a Vox AC30 type of circuit. But again, having that same kind of approach, so that as long as I have a beautiful, clear tube sound in the amp, just that classic tube tone, then I get everything else from the pedal board. I use 3 different overdrives, and they're just different amounts of overdrive. So I got to turn around here and get the name of it. The Bell by Wampler is their version of the Noble OD1 overdrive that every studio player in Nashville had. And I had one too. And the Wampler, they got that same circuit, but with a little more EQ control. And that's my very light overdrive. Then my medium overdrive is the Wampler Tumnus, which is their version of the Klon Centaur, the one that was for $5,000 now. And then my just full-on gain is a full-tone OCD. And then I've got two boosts. I've got an old DOD Bifet overdrive. I mean, this is like from the early days of DOD when their pedals were really ugly. And then I've also got a another one. I'm blanking out on the name, but you know, Richie Blackmore and Eddie Van Halen used to use the old tape Echoplex, and they both found that, hey, even when you don't have the echo engaged, it still goes through that preamp, and they liked what it did to their sound. And so this guy copied that preamp, that circuit, and even went back and found some new old stock of some of the components and made that. And I use that, and that warms things up nicely. I've got an SP compressor by Exotic that has a blend control. So it's not just on and off, but you can control how much compressed signal. And then I've got wah wah pedal Bob Bradshaw by Jim Dunlop. It has two inductors, so you have a classic voicing and then you have a more modern voicing. And I will never do a gig for the rest of my life without a volume pedal, because the Bradshaw thing came with one, and I just loved having that control, not having to depend on a sound man to goose me for solos, or if you got a nice part going, you just back it off, rhythm part, back it off when the vocal comes in. Boom, the vocalist can hear himself. Your part's still there, the full amount of gain and everything, but it's just the master volume comes down. So it's just like you're live mixing your own signal. So guitar-wise, my main is a Steve Lukather model by Ernie Ball Music Man. I've got a Fender Telecaster with two humbuckers. I've got this beast you see back here over my shoulder. That is a Carlo Robelli. And I don't know if you remember when we toured Holland, you and I, and we met our friend Mike Colleen, and he was playing a Carlo Robelli Les Paul at that time. Okay. And this is the only other Carlo Robelli I've ever seen. Basically, it's made in Korea, and Carlo Robelli is the house brand of Sam Ash music. And I just went into Nashville Used Music one day, saw that hanging on the wall, and I went, okay, it's it's Eddie Van Halen, a wolf kind of takeoff. I picked it up, and the neck just felt like $1 million. Felt like it was made for my hands. I turned around, look at the price, $129. I thought, if the electronics are just junk, I can't get hurt. So I bought the thing, and I've used it on a ton of things. Acoustically, I've got a Maton custom shop. It's called a Messiah model. They're the brand that Tommy Emmanuel uses, and very, very happy with that. Got a 12-string, got a mandolin, and I have the wonderful Zahn bass back here that my Michael Gregory band bass player, the late Michael Kelly, willed to me upon his passing. And I use it on sessions here at the studio. That red Strat back there belongs to a friend. I'm just doing some work on that for him. And then I've also got in the 50s, Gibson made a Les Paul TV, the little yellow flat top Les Paul with the P90s. And I've got one of those coming that my wife, Janan, got me for Christmas, but they were back ordered. So it's supposed to be showing up this month.
Well, I'm glad you're getting back, because I have never known Mike Gregory without a Les Paul. Okay. Yeah. Although when you first started playing in Mana, you had a Strat. I think it was a Strat.
I did.
Yeah. And but I've never. I remember going down to, was it Skip's Music in on Fulton or Florin or something
Road.
Yeah, and you had traded the Strat in for the black Les Paul. Was it a custom? What was that? Standard? What was that?
7 Les Paul Standard. One of the first ones made when they moved to Nashville, when they moved from Kalamazoo, and it was one of the first run. And I don't know if you remember this, but like it had a buzz, like a hum to it. I was like, what's going on? And my brother Scott, who did all my guitar repair, the ground wire was not hooked up. It was run, but it was not soldered. And so we soldered that out. So it must have been, when they were just getting started at the factory there.
Yeah.
Morning guitar.
So yeah, and then you're using the Steve Lukather right now, and yeah, it's a great sounding guitar. It's a great guy.
Yeah. A Strat is like a Swiss Army knife. You can do just about anything with a Strat.
Well, yeah. So your Bradshaw system, you no longer have that?
No, I actually found a guy who wanted to buy the whole thing. There was a band touring called Classic Rock All Stars.
Yes.
And so you'd have, like not Neil Schon, Greg Raleigh and Brad Delp and, classic rockers who were going out on these package tours. And there was one central band that would back them up. And that guitar player, I can't remember his name, but he lived down in Ventura. And, I just, what the heck, I'll put it on Craigslist, some other places. I doubt I'll find one person to just buy the whole thing. I'll probably have to part it out. And the guy said, I'll take it. So.
Man, that's great. And yeah, I complain, especially at my age, that, you can tell an old musician if they have back problems, because, lugging those heavy amps and those PA systems all over the country, wasn't fun. So, so listen, got a question here for you on the 10,000. I'm talking to a number of people about this on the 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah.
Where do you feel you stand?
Okay. I use a different measuring stick for that. The 10,000 hour rule, of course, is very applicable. But for me, the way I've always thought of it in terms of, especially when it came up, when musicians would complain about how little they get paid for how much time and effort and experience, they put in. And basically my experience and my expertise that has evolved through that experience is greater than a postdoc. So, you get your undergrad, you get your PhD, you do your postdoctorate, then you're a master of whatever, be it law, medicine, engineering, any of those fields. Last year, 2020, marked 50 years that I've been playing. I started in 1970. And so, that's a lifetime. That's a generation. So that, I think, is beyond a postdoc or beyond the 10,000 hours.
Yeah, no, I find it interesting because most of the people that I've been fortunate to interview, we've exceeded that 10,000 rule, but it's just funny to ask people where they're at. And I interviewed a sax player yesterday. In fact, our sax player for the band I'm in, and he actually sat down and did the math.
Wow.
Okay. And he says, okay. He says, so anyway, you'll have to watch that video podcast, because that was very, very interesting. He actually broke it down for him. So,
well, that's great. Because I would tell people, I'd say, I've got more experience than like a constitutional lawyer, or certainly as much. I said, but I can't bill at $250 an hour.
Boy, wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. Yeah, tell me about it. So, all right. So, got a question here. Out of the place, and you played, you the amount of venues you played, I'm sure just, you could sit there and just make a list of all of them. It would take you a while. What's the most memorable place that you performed?
Out of all of them, the top is Red Rocks.
Okay.
Not only just for the spectacle of what it is and all the historicity, all the people that have played there,
yeah.
The sound truly is amazing. It is just an amazing thing. I mean, I got to check off a lot of my, bucket list venues. Red Rocks was certainly at the top. The Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, where the Grand Ole Opry started. I did the Opry 3 times at the Ryman, 3 times at the New Rock Opry House, the Radio City Music Hall, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Blockbuster Pavilion down in Devore, California, which is where the US Festival was. I think the total seating, that was on that Alabama tour. I think the total seating is like 70,000. Then Tower Theater in Philadelphia, the Fox Theater in Atlanta, the Fox Theater in Detroit, House of Blues on Sunset Strip, and a place you and I used to joke about, the Billy Bob in Fort Worth, Texas. I played 3 times there with Steve Holy, and that's the biggest nightclub in the world. It's so big that they have a stage at each end of it, and then one band does a set, then the other band does a set, and they alternate.
Wow.
So, it's literally, you could put a couple of super Walmarts in there.
Holy smoke.
Probably has its own zip code. And it was always right around the corner from Joe Marty's, like one of the most famous Mexican food places there. So always loved.
Not Noggles, huh?
Huh?
Not Noggles.
We could tell Noggle stories.
Oh my God. Yeah, we have a few. Hey, listen, I got a question to ask you. This is just the audience just gets to sit in on this one. We opened for Daniel Amos at a theater in Fresno. Yeah. And I know it was one of the, I couldn't remember if it was the Wilson Theater or the Fox Theater. Do you remember what it was?
It was the Fox.
It was the Fox. Okay. Yeah. Because
remember the Tim, the bass player for Daniel Amos, had purchased not just one of, but the very 12-string Hamer bass that Tom Peterson from Cheap Trick had used on the Live at Budokan record. Because remember, I had somebody say, take a picture of me with this thing. It's history, Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said, what's the most memorable venue that you've ever played? I thought, oh gosh, I mean, we played the Highland Crossover. Remember, we played the Highland Crossover in Memphis. Then we looked at the wall of everybody that had been there.
Yeah,
signed the wall. I mean, you had Elton John, you had Eric Clapton. I mean, it was just like you sat there and you went, that have been on that stage. But I said, you know what? There was a theater in Fresno, and I can't remember. Anyway, thank you for clearing that up. So
yeah, the fun. Also, while I'm just thinking, it was kind of springing to mind. Venue was TV. When I was with Billy Gilman, they did a lot of TV with him to get him exposure really quick. And so we ended up doing Tonight Show with Leno. We did the Today Show out in the street with Katie Couric. Did CNN Showbiz This Week. We did Rosie O'Donnell. Let me think. We did the American Music Awards, People Choice Awards. I mean, they really, great management. They got him maximum exposure in a very short amount of time.
I remember I think I was in the bedroom or the bathroom or somewhere, and my wife comes running in and she says, Hun, she goes, Mike's on TV. I said, what? Michael Gregory is on TV. I said, did he get arrested or something? She goes, no, 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 don't go. So anyway, I go out to the front room, and there you are. I think it was on the Today Show.
Okay.
With Billy Gilliam, or
Yeah.
you know, and I said, yeah, that's Mike. You know, I know that guy.
I know that guy. You know, we also did Letterman.
Yes.
And that Ed Sullivan Theater, they kept that thing like an ice box. It was absolutely freezing. I don't know how anybody, you know, the bands that play and stuff do that. It was like, or if my experience was typical, but it was so cold.
Down jacket, huh? And
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. All right, so hey, listen, moving forward here, and we're covering a lot of ground. You post a lot of stuff on Facebook where you're playing.
Yeah.
I'm curious, where do you get the inspiration? How do you pick those songs?
Okay, I'll tell you how it started. After I got out of touring and got into healthcare, I left touring as my bread and butter in 2006. And from 2007 to 2011, I went to Tennessee State University and got a degree in health information management. So I'm like a healthcare IT guy now, professionally since 2011, while still playing. So when I got into healthcare, and I was maybe doing like 2 gigs, 3 gigs a year, just local gigs. So, but I was always playing at home. And you reach a certain stage in life, you get to a certain age, and you kind of you start to look back and get this nostalgia and romance about your formative years. And I'm like, oh, all these songs, and so I thought, okay, just as a venue, an outlet for me to play, I'll just play along with, I'm going to pick all these songs that were inspirational to me in coming up as a guitar player, my formative years, and just play along with them and do the video. And I'd put those on my YouTube channel on Facebook. And then I started getting such a positive response, and it kept kind of snowballing. And then so I went, okay, let's do like series. So I do like a Steely Dan series, so I did one song featuring Jeff Baxter, one with Carlton, one with Denny Diaz, one with Steve Kahn, all the great guitar players they had, Walter Becker himself. And so then it just kept going out and out and out. And, these years later, 10 years, there's like over 200 videos on there. And I'd always post them on Facebook in addition to posting them to YouTube. And then it turned into kind of a unintentional, people would start reaching out to me via YouTube, say, man, I've always wanted to learn that song, and I can see what your hands are doing, but it's, I can't slow it down. And so I started getting hired to do lesson videos on certain songs. And the two out of all of them, Hey 19 by Steely Dan, I've gotten more requests on that one. And the number 2 would be Poetry Man by Phoebe Snow, because she played the guitar on it as well. And so that's turned into a nice little side business. I don't even advertise it or anything, just a certain amount of people every now and again just hit me up and go, hey, I'd love to learn that song. Can you do a teaching video on it? And then I also stream on Facebook sometimes. Since the lockdown and nobody's gigging, I still play every day. I come home here to this room, and I've got a studio, and I do sessions for clients. But then there's times I just feel like, that sense of community. And so I'll just put on Facebook, start streaming, and just play whatever comes to mind. And people start getting in the chat and making requests, and I become a human jukebox for a half hour, and and it just keeps me in touch with people. And
no, I love watching those. I love watching those. In fact, I don't know, a year or so ago, maybe even might have been more, you did a solo on one of the albums we recorded, You Were Always There.
Yes.
I love that. And then one of the other bands that I was in that you weren't in, we called you in for that session to repeat that solo. But
That's
yeah, and yeah, it was a great song. It is a great song. Not was, but it is a great song. So
absolutely.
Anyway, I just want to tell you, for those people that can follow you on Facebook, give us some information on that, Mike.
I believe because there's a lot of Michael Gregory's out there. One who is a nationally known guitar player too. So basically, I think I'm facebook.com/michael.gregory.925. So by the time I joined, there were probably 924 other Michael Gregorys that joined before I did. And then my YouTube channel, if you just search for Michael Gregory guitar, and it'll come, like I said, there's probably I know there's over 200 videos on that channel now over the years. And they're just, play along videos, me playing along with stuff that was inspirational to me or things that I have enjoyed. And there's things where I would just get a jam along track on YouTube that fit my mood that day, put that on, and we just improvise over it,
So if someone was interested in taking online lessons with you, are you accepting?
I am doing a limited amount of those. I work my full-time healthcare job, but I do take students. They can reach out to me at Twanghang, TWANGHANG @hotmail.com.
Good. Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to make sure to get that in. So, okay, let's, there's a question that I ask all my guests so far, and I want to ask you what, because you had mentioned some earlier albums that were basically kind of plopped on you, but if you were stranded on a desert island, and you could only have 3 albums, 1, 2, 3. What would those albums be, Mike?
That I had to think long and hard about that one, and this might not be my final answer, but the first one, Access Bold as Love, just because that's the album that made me want to play music. Second would be, it's hard to pick one Beatles album, but Sgt. Pepper. That's one that's just, a masterpiece and a groundbreaker and an absolute cultural revolution. That album cannot be overestimated. And then third, and I've got a reason for this, is kind of Metal Fatigue by Alan Holdsworth. A lot of what Alan Holdsworth did was just so esoteric and so different that it's just not listenable to in big chunks for me. But that Metal Fatigue album, it's the most accessible, but still, for the most part, I don't know what's going on. It's the downside of having a good ear. I can just hear just about anything, and I know what he's doing instantly. Just you just know. You've heard so much music. Most popular music is done within a very narrow framework, and yeah, it's that. But Alan Holdsworth, I listen to most of what he's doing. I go, I don't know what he's doing, and that's refreshing. Because I can listen to it just as a listener, not as the analytical musician. Because I pull things apart without even thinking about it. It's just spontaneous. I'll be in a restaurant and talking with my wife, and I'll stop, and she'll go, "It's the song, isn't it?" And I go, "Yeah, I can hear the song." I'm like, one ear is pulled away.
Yeah, no, those are great. Those are great. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Each of my guests so far have just, I was like, wow, okay, all right.
And if you ask me tomorrow, it might change.
Yeah, no, it probably would. It probably would. So, but well, listen, Mike, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and thank you for spending the time with me and talking about some of the good old days, and sharing your history. I really appreciate you taking the time and spending with the audience here at Analogpod. And any closing thoughts?
Well, again, thank you. I talked to my brother Scott today, and I said, hey, Leonard Carillo is going to interview me for this podcast that he's launching. And he goes, oh, that'll be cool. I said, yeah, especially because I've been interviewed before, but not by somebody who's known me so long and so well. And my brother said, yeah, he knows where all the bodies are buried. But, there's only one other person in my life that I played as many gigs and traveled as many miles with besides you, and that was the late Michael Kelly, my Michael Gregory band bass player. But when you and I were in the bands we were in, I mean, we weren't full time. We were working jobs and stuff. But I remember one year we did over 200 dates. Yeah. We were just playing constantly and gathering that invaluable experience. So in a parting word, I would just say to those that are pursuing music who may be younger, that I see this with my students a lot, don't get so caught up in and hyper-focused on the destination that you forget to enjoy the journey and the ride. Music is medicine, especially in this time when the situation in the world is depriving so many of us of the entertainments and the pleasures and enjoyments that we've had so freely. So really just enjoy music and love it. And, it's good to be focused, have goals, but enjoy it. It is just, in this stage of life, I'll be 60 this year, it's just medicine. I come home from my job, and whether I have a student or not, I come right to this room, I grab a guitar and start playing. It's just my medicine. And, I hope I get to perform in front of people again. But if I don't, whether there's people there or not, this is still my medicine. And so take your medicine.
Definitely. Great words. I was just talking with someone the other day, and I said, one of the interesting things about Michael Gregory, I said, everywhere he went that I was with him, he had a guitar in his hand. And I said, it's in his DNA. It's just what it is. I remember we were on the bus, and you were trying to learn some Steve Morris songs, and you had a cassette player, and you would stick your finger in the cassette, in the spool, to try to slow it down a little bit so you could hear what he was playing. And I was telling somebody that the other day, and I said, yeah, it's just interesting because, he was consumed with the guitar. And,
it was an impression for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, well, listen, Mike, I have taken up a lot of your time, and I'm sure the audience will love this. And but anyway, got the information to stay in touch with you and to contact you about lessons or just to chat with you, because I know you're that kind of guy. You would probably do that. But again, man, I appreciate so much having you on the show.
Thank you. Again, an honor and a joy to have this time with you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay. God bless you, brother.
You too.